The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Volume 19, Article 1, Part 88 of 93, 1892 and 1893. The Early Chapters of Genesis. By William Kelly. Genesis 11 verses 8 and 9. Thus was the scheme of human self-will brought to naught. They had left out God and at best forgotten his word. They had dared to oppose his will who commanded that they should fill the earth. They sought, on the contrary, to hold together in a region well suited for the union, being alike fertile in itself and peculiarly adapted to receive supplies from all sides. There they proposed not only to build a city and a tower of imposing pretension but to make themselves a name, that they should not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Therefore Jehovah interfered, not yet in punishment of their rebellious audacity, but by a dealing which left no doubt of his hand and compelled their dispersion according to his declared mind. And Jehovah scattered them thence over the face of the whole earth. And they left off building the city. Therefore was its name called Babel, confusion, because Jehovah there confounded the language of the whole earth. And Jehovah scattered them thence over the face of the whole earth, verses 8 and 9. Thus it was that mankind spread everywhere after the flood. It came to pass after a certain lapse of time, not willingly but under the constraint of divine power. This so thoroughly and at once confounded them, that they might well dread the issue of any further effort to disobey. Thus nationalities began, each with its peculiar tongue, in their lands, but as mercy ruled according to their families. There was no confusion in Jehovah's ordering. Genesis 11 verses 1 to 9 is the key to the previous Genesis 10, the moral account thus graphically of what was there given as a fact. It is sorrowful to find the lack of simple faith even in minds not at all unfriendly to revelation. But men suffer, partly through undue heed to tradition, partly through indulging in dreams of their own. Thus Jacob Bryant, in his New System, or Analysis of Ancient Mythology, Volume 4, 31-15, 3rd edition, 1807, strives to give a very different turn to the confusion of tongues. As his learned work may weigh with some, it seems well to notice briefly what he alleges for denying the general bearing of the event, which he would limit to the Cushite, and pare down in itself to a labial failure, so that the people affected could not articulate and thus failed to understand each other. This I take to be the true purport of the history, from whence we may infer that the confusion of language was a partial event, and that the whole of mankind is by no means to be included in the dispersion from Babel. It related chiefly to the sons of Cush, whose intention was to have founded a great, if not a universal, empire, but by this judgment, their purpose was defeated. 37. Hence he distinguishes the scattering here as partial, from the earth divided to the nations in the days of Peleg as a general event in which all were concerned. We must, therefore, instead of the language of all the earth, substitute the language of the whole country, also a failure and incapacity in a labial utterance. By this their speech was confounded, but not altered, for as soon as they separated, they recovered their true tenor of pronunciation, and the language of the earth continued for some ages nearly the same. For evidence, Mr. Bryant sends us to M. A. Court de Gabelins Monde Primitif Analyse Copyright et Compare Copyright avec le Monde Moderne, in 9 volumes 4 1774-1784, an ambitious effort of no solid value, any more than this speculation of our own countrymen before us. Now not a word in Scripture belittles the fact or God's dealing as is here done. In Genesis 10 verses 8 to 10, we have the pride of power which a son of Cush betrayed early, but a wholly different phase is here, not individual usurpation, nor a kingdom or empire, but a sort of universal republic, as we have already remarked. In that chapter, which is not chronological but descriptive, we have simply the families of Noah's sons after their families and tongues, in their lands and nations. Here in Genesis 11, we have the moral cause, why Jehovah scattered them contrary to their perverse resolve to hold together in the land of Shinar. We have not a word about Nimrod or any other individual here. The force lies in its universality. Attention is expressly called to the whole earth being of one lip and of words alike also. Not a hint is dropped of one land in particular. There would be nothing to surprise in one country pervaded by one tongue, but we are reminded of the state that thus characterized all the earth, in order the better to appreciate the judgment which compelled men suddenly to speak diversely, and so not to understand one another's speech. It is then an unsubstantial dream to fancy that it was only the Cushites, however numerously followed by others. Not only is there no evidence of any specific family, but the inspired record excludes any such construction. Nimrod was subsequent to the scattering, for the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, other cities following. He was not afraid to start his ambitious enterprise from a city branded by divine displeasure. The scattering had already taken place. It was a new form of man's will, for there was no thought or pretense of its being ordained of God. Nor was there any such mark of God's intervention as that which dealt with their purpose to unite unholily and to make themselves a name. But it was no mere temporary fit of labial failure as Bryant imagined, again without a scrap of divine evidence. It was Jehovah confounding their language so that men should be no longer one, but be divided into nations henceforth, though mercy took care that the tongues should not dislocate their families. It was Jehovah's doing, not nature nor circumstances, nor development, but a manifestly judicial and a lasting dealing of divine power. And the account is exactly suited to the inspired and only reliable book of origins, where man's history fails, and tradition is as puerile and misleading as pretentious philosophy, spinning cobwebs from within.